Philosophically, what does Superman represent to people?
A friend, and that's what people really need most. They don't need a strong arm, one man vigilante force. They need a friend. We're living in an age when people are basically afraid of contact with each other. They're afraid. People live in cities. They don't even know their neighbors. They're afraid to go out in the street. Something might happen to them. Basically, technology is against you. Life is overwhelming. Even the bank doesn't know who you are. And it's like, we run around scared a lot, particularly those of us who live in cities. And America was founded on the virtues of a helping hand, of going 5 miles to lend your neighbor a donkey or whatever he needed. And I think that is that kind of virtue that's at the bottom. That's the heart of Superman. The genuine love of people, and that you always know he's your friend.
Superman is the greatest comic book hero ever created. I don't think anyone can really disagree unless they're trying to be edgy or different. The only comic hero I can think of that could come remotely close to this is Spider-Man. But with James Gunn's Superman legacy kicking off the DCU in a few years, I wanted to try my hand at my own Superman trilogy. I want a Superman trilogy that encapsulates Superman's morals and personality, but also has action, which is something I think Man of Steel failed to do. We never got to really see Henry Cavill's Superman be a bright light on the people of Metropolis. Instead, he was something that they feared and didn't trust in BVS, only to have them mourn him in Justice League in the Snyder Cut. Superman never really saved people in either of these films. Yeah, he stopped huge forces and disasters that would have hurt people, but never physically saved a person. Instead, in Man of Steel, he rampaged through Metropolis fighting Zod, destroying buildings and probably killing hundreds of people. We need a trilogy with a lighter tone. I know some people may not like that, but it's true. Snyder's vision, while unique to say the least, isn't what the character needs right now. Superman should bring hope. He needs to be a smile within the sea of frowns in today's society. Does this mean he should be saving cats from trees? Sometimes. Do I think he shouldn't beat the crap out of villains? No. But that doesn't mean he shouldn't try to help the villain or avoid a fight whenever possible. Now, with casting, I think James Gunn's casting is perfect. I was rooting for Corn, Sweat, and Brosnahan to be cast alongside one another and was very excited when they were. On top of this, the rumored casting for Jimmy Olsen being Skylar Gisondo is also very solid. Skylar is an actor that's definitely slept on, with amazing roles in Booksmart, Righteous Gemstones, and Santa Clarita. He pretty much embodies the character of Jimmy, and I hope this rumor is true. If it's not, I'll cry. Perry White needs to have a somewhat large role in these films, often being a guiding force for the time that Clark and Lois spend together. I think someone like John Goodman or Keith David could play him well, but I think Nick Offerman could play the role really well. I want to see him do something like this, maybe a little further out of his comfort zone. We've already seen him in a great role in The Last of Us. Each movie in this trilogy needs to showcase Superman's humanity, not his need to understand his Kryptonian heritage. He grew up in Kansas on a farm. He shouldn't say the symbol on his chest means hope on his world. Earth is his world, and his humanity needs to be showcased through his villains. I chose the villains for each film that could challenge Superman on a deeper level every time. For a character like Parasite, I chose Tim Blake Nelson. It's not so much his look that does it for me, it's his ability to act clumsy, something the character of Rudy Jones is no stranger to. I would like to go for a fatter and grosser design for the actual Parasite, but as Rudy Jones, Tim Blake Nelson is perfect. For Brainiac, I chose Bill Nye. No, not that one, the other one. I think his voice is perfect for the role. I was thinking someone like Ralph Fiennes, but the more I thought about Bill Nye, the more I liked it. And finally, for Lex Luthor, I chose Sterling K. Brown. I feel like his character in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where he was a persistent dentist who accidentally let the fact that he committed a murder slip up, perfectly encapsulates who Lex Luthor is. I'm gonna go a little faster when I'm talking about the smaller castings, mainly because I don't want this video to be 30 minutes of me talking about why I like these actors in these roles. But Cat Grant could be played by Kristen Bell, Steve Lombard would be played by Patrick Warburton, Heather Kelly would be played by Katherine Newton, Martha Kent would be played by Sally Fields, and finally Jonathan Kent, who I think Mark Hamill could play the role perfectly. Also, Silas Stone, played by Andre Braugher. General Zod, played by Anthony Starr, would be pretty funny, but I chose Benjamin Bratt as he's closer to the age of my Jor-El and Laura Lorvan, who would be played by John Hamm and Jennifer Connelly, respectively. I'll go into some detail on all three movies, but overall I'm just going to be giving an outline of how each movie should be and what it should try and do with its characters. The first movie would simply be titled Superman. I didn't want to do something like The Superman because I don't think it fits here as well as it did with The Batman. Batman. I feel like the Superman gives off the same vibes as Man of Steel, a more action-oriented, tough guy movie. As I mentioned before, the main villain would be Rudy Jones, aka Parasite. Throughout the movie, we'd see how crappy Rudy's life is. We'd see that he lives in the slums of Metropolis, something that's not really expressed in any form of media besides the comics. I feel like we've seen Metropolis as this utopia, but like any city, I'm sure it has its ghettos and its richer neighborhoods. Along with this, Rudy gets an eviction notice, which pushes his character into a spiral. He works at Star Labs as a janitor, where he would knock over a canister which releases a pink substance that makes its way over to him. This is his origin as the Parasite. A depressed, poor man who is screwed by Metropolis's seemingly perfect system, who becomes the host of an alien parasite that Star Labs was studying. The Clark and Lois aspect should be the main focus of the first movie, alongside Superman's ideologies. Lois wouldn't know Clark is Superman yet, but we can see that they have feelings for one another. Clark maybe more than Lois. Clark works alongside Lois often, as well as Jimmy Olsen. Cat Grant and Steve Lombard are also seen every now and then in this movie, working on their own stories. Lois needs to be a main character alongside Clark. This is something that I love that Gunn is doing. Lois is just as important of a character as Clark. In recent films, I felt like Lois was pushed to the side and only really used as a plot point for Superman. Clark ends up asking her to go on a date, albeit very awkwardly, but she says no. She's busy with the story. The story given to her by Perry White gives Lois the opportunity to do a profile on Star Labs' newest scientist, Silas Stone. Now we're tying together our A plot and our B plot. Silas Stone is working closely with the substance that turned Rudy into the parasite, and Lois Lane just so happens to be interviewing him. Clark is stuck with more useless articles. We'd get similar scenes to the show Afterlife, where Ricky Gervais's character is constantly interviewing the most boring people. I feel like this should be how Clark is with the citizens of Metropolis when it comes to the stories he's writing. This would be paired nicely with what Superman should be doing in this movie. Superman and Clark are basically two separate people. I think it would be fun to actually see the two side by side. For every scene we get of Clark having to deal with a weird Metropolis citizen for small stories to fill the rest of the paper, we get a scene of Superman being a friend. Yes, this would include saving a cat from a tree. I don't think I need to really explain why. Superman needs to be a friend to the people of Metropolis, and this movie needs to showcase that friendship. Throughout the film, we'd see Parasite attacking smaller power plants outside of the city, but when he turns his attention to Star Labs' power grid, it draws the attention of both Superman and the Metropolis police force. The climax of the movie would be Superman learning through Lois and Dr. Stone that Parasite is Rudy Jones, a helpless man who just needs help. Superman sympathizes with Parasite rather than just beating him. Realizing that this isn't Rudy's fault, it's the Parasite. He tries to look for a way to save him. I personally think Superman would need to find a way to save everyone. He doesn't want to hurt Rudy, so he starts pulling his punches. He instead begins yelling, trying to get through the thick Parasite skin. Parasite doesn't listen and still goes towards the Star Labs building. This gives Superman another motive. He has to save the people of Metropolis, Rudy, and now Lois. After a tough battle, Parasite almost destroys the Star Labs building, almost killing Lois and everyone inside. Superman starts to break through to Rudy. Just as he does, the Metropolis police force intervene and begin shooting Parasite, riling him up even more. The climax ends with Superman using his freeze breath on Parasite. He had no choice. Not being able to find a solution, forced to go against every fiber of his being, until he realizes that the frozen parts of the Parasite have died. They got too cold. They froze over. He begins breaking off pieces of the Parasite one by one, revealing Rudy on the inside, but dying. He rushes him to the Star Labs building where they put him under intensive care. He'll live, but barely. The next time Lois sees Clark, she kisses him. And that's the end of the first movie, but I'm sure you're wondering, where's Lex? Well, he's not in the first film of the trilogy, at all. Aside from a few mentions, he won't have any role in it. As for the second film, he still isn't really in it, but you'll see why. The second film in the trilogy would be titled Superman for All. While the first film challenged Superman's morals on a personal level, what about something Superman can't touch personally, like the entire world? For the second film, we need to take Superman's morals and his friend-like attitude and push it to the extreme. He's comfortable in his ability to save the day, so we push that as far as possible. The villain of this film is Brainiac. I think it's about time he was used in a movie, and I thought he fits this story pretty well. Brainiac is cold and cynical, where Superman is warm and empathetic. He basically takes Superman's morals, ideologies, even his personality, and flips it, which is what we need for the second film of a trilogy. The second movie should open with our first look at Krypton itself, more specifically the city of Kandor. We'd see a Kandorian market, filled with people. The scene should quickly pick up as people begin running. We'd find a pregnant Lara Lor-Van in the crowd, looking for Jor-El, who would quickly find her and get her to safety. We'd then see the cause of this commotion: Brainiac androids. The androids push the Kryptonians to the edge of Kandor after killing hundreds of them. General Zod and the rest of the military finally arrive to fight back, but are stopped when a large beam comes from the sky, blinding everyone. When we gain our sight back, we see nothing. Kandor is gone. All that's left is a pit in the ground the size of Kandor. The rest of the movie should focus on Clark balancing his relationship with Lois and being Superman. We also need this movie to nail Clark's relationship with his parents, more specifically Jonathan. Clark and Jonathan's relationship is the most prevalent throughout most Superman media, and I think it should be no different here. The relationship is the main focus of this movie. Whenever Clark doubts being Superman, Jonathan is there. In this movie, I feel like Lois and Clark would have been dating for about a year in between films. We'd get a scene of Clark bringing Lois back to the farm in Smallville for a family dinner, and they'd stay with him in Smallville for the weekend. This is where Clark would propose. Lois would, of course, say yes. The family would all celebrate together on the farm. This movie should also showcase a lot of Clark worrying that he can't do enough. He's been Superman for a few years now, and there's no shortage of crime, corruption, or even supervillain. This movie would also have to eventually blow Clark's secret with Lois. She needs to find out sooner or later. She should be mad at him for not telling her, but understand why he didn't. Since this is a superhero movie, we need some action. I think throughout the movie, we'd need to see Brainiac attacking other worlds, scenes of the devastation he causes. This would add some physical stakes to a film that has been more or less about emotion. Superman's first interaction with Brainiac would be his androids. Brainiac would send down hundreds of them, just like he did on Krypton and the other planets. Superman would stop them, showing Brainiac that he needs to have more of a hands-on approach to attacking this planet. I think it would also be cool if we don't see Brainiac yet. We'd see glimpses of his ship, but more or less, I think it would be super menacing to keep him in his cocoon, like in Superman Brainiac. The final battle would be Superman fighting thousands of Brainiac droids all across the globe, shooting from one corner of the Earth to the other within seconds, destroying these androids, finally defeating them all, launching into space, attacking Brainiac's ship. We'd get the reveal of Brainiac. We need a more technologically dependent Brainiac, using the technology from his ship to fight Superman, kind of like he does in Injustice 2. While they battled, Brainiac would give Superman some exposition, his reasoning for attacking planets, stealing cities. He's a living supercomputer. Not only is he fighting to become the smartest living object in the universe, he's also fighting to be the sole catalyst of its knowledge. So how does he do that? He steals the knowledge from different species and then kills every last member of that species, completely eradicating not only their culture, but any addition to that culture. He's practically trying to become a living encyclopedia of the entire universe. During this exposition, Brainiac, the living computer, the smartest living thing in the universe, would slip up. He would mention how animals are disgusting, the pollution they cause, the oversaturation of sound and smells, destroying the things that give them life, exploiting them for their own personal gain. Humans are the epitome of this. Superman would be too busy trying to stop Brainiac to hear his father having a heart attack back in Smallville. Lois would be holding Jonathan, yelling for Martha. Superman would end the fight by destroying the ship's systems, practically destroying any sort of regeneration or further creation of any version of Brainiac. After this, he grabs Brainiac and flies him down to Earth. He'd fly him through city after city, the sounds of each one overloading Brainiac's systems. The smells would do the same. The grossly polluted air of a city like LA or New Delhi would also contribute to this. Brainiac's ship would eventually crash land in a swamp, exactly where Superman would also leave Brainiac, who is at this point in a vegetable-like stasis. Brainiac is dead. Superman floats over the ship, watching it. He suddenly hears Lois screaming all the way from Smallville. Almost instantly after, he hears his mother screaming. He'd zoom, breaking the sound barrier. He stops almost instantaneously at the foot of the farmhouse. The wind quickly follows, tearing down a tree and shifting the house. He'd drop to his knees. Lois would hold him. We fade to black. The only thing we'd hear in this black void. Pa? The trembling voice of Clark. Not Superman, Clark. The third movie is a hard one to write. Lex is the main villain of this film. The title of this film would be Superman for Tomorrow. I think this matches the film perfectly. It showcases both how everyone on Earth can depend on Superman, not only today, but tomorrow, and showcases how Superman himself should be looking forward, not focusing on the events that take place in the past. The movie would start on black, the words of Clark's eulogy perforating our senses. The funeral service would be held in Smallville, as opposed to Metropolis. Lex should be menacing but charming. He should feel like a threat to the people he wants to threaten, and seem like a great guy to the people he wants something from. A real savant of the business world, a manipulator. We'd see that Lex is trying to secure a deal with the government to sell them biologically enhancing supersuits. We'd see the prototype that's painted green and purple with the LexCorp L on the chest. This is Lex's guiding force throughout the movie. He wants to make money. This is pretty much Lex's plot in every Superman movie he's been in, I know, but I like the idea of him using super suits instead. Superman will be taking a break in Act 1 of this movie. He needs a minute between his father's death and going out and saving more people. During this time, Lex would be trying to secure this deal by any means necessary. He would use employees to go out and perform the acts that Superman used to, saving people, stopping disasters. The only difference would be that Lex is using this for political gain. The Act 1 climax would be the reveal that Lex is running for president. He wants to use this super suit program to create more political ties, trying to get himself in the favor of other politicians. But Clark would see right through all of Lex's lies. He needs to step back up to the cape. He second guesses himself, but Lois convinces him to do it. Throughout the rest of the movie, we'd see Lex's employees stopping disasters, but not saving the people. This would bring Superman onto Lex's bad side. Superman would go around saving the people that Lex's employees aren't. This would make Lex look bad to the general public, bringing down Lex's polling numbers, making him enraged. He goes on the attack on Superman. Not physically, not yet. He still tries to gain some points back with the citizens of America. He'd say he would regulate superheroes. He'd point the finger at Superman. How many aliens or supervillains have ravaged our country since Superman came into our world? This would only prove his desperation, pointing the finger at the only person who is causing his career harm. How do we know he won't stop pointing his laser eyes at bad guys and point it at us instead? The tension would only build between the two, finally ending when Superman exposes the fact that one of the disasters was caused by Lex himself. This is the climax of Act 2. We'd see Lex's hatred of Superman boil over, propelling us into Act 3. The final fight would take place in Metropolis against Superman and a supersuit-equipped Lex. Lex would outsmart Superman multiple times. We'd need to showcase his genius-level intellect at some point. The battle would end with Superman standing above Lex. Will he prove Lex right? He stands above, enraged. He looks at the crowd of Metropolis citizens around him. A little boy stands with a toy, a Superman action figure, and a Superman emblem on his shirt. Superman snaps out of any haze he was in. He blasts his eyes through Lex's suit, disabling it, not harming Lex in the slightest. Lex screams in defeat. Superman would stand Lex up, Lex's eyes filled with rage, defeat, and confusion. Superman would walk Lex slowly to the nearest cop car and hand him over to the police before flying off. The next day, the issue of the Daily Planet would have an expose written by Lois Lane, giving evidence to everything Lex had done leading up to the battle, effectively removing him from the presidential race. The true ending of this movie would be the wedding of Lois and Clark. Everyone is there. Martha, Jimmy, Kat, Steve, Lois's father. One seat is left empty. The seat next to Martha. After the ceremony, Clark sees a man pacing in the hallway, muttering to himself. As he gets closer, he realizes it's Rudy Jones. He asks Rudy if he's okay, trying to conceal his voice to make sure he doesn't recognize him. Rudy slowly reveals he knows Clark is Superman and thanks him for saving his life. He tells him he thought he was useless, but when Superman saved him, he felt seen. Clark asks how he knows he's Superman, and Rudy says, "How can I forget the face of the man who saved me?" Kind of a joke on how nobody seems to recognize Clark as Superman through his glasses, as we fade to black. I love this trilogy, and I hope you at least liked it. I worked my ass off writing it, and I have a love for this character that can't really be put into words. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created this character to inspire people, to give people hope. I think this trilogy not only showcases this hope, but the humanity that Superman represents. From the moment Superman gets put in that ship, to the moment he lands on Earth, to the moment he dons the cape for the first time. He's our friend. Our Superman. Subscribe and like the video if you liked it, and dislike it if you didn't. Comment with your thoughts, and I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.